everyone, welcome to Legal Bytes. I'm Alyte, and on this channel we explain the law one bite at a time. So today we're going to do another pop culture trial. I rewatched Big Hero 6 recently because reasons. And of course there were some things that jumped out at me that I thought would be interesting to discuss. Of course, if you've seen the movie, you know that there's murder, theft of intellectual property,
microbots,
illegal gambling, and the usual assault and attempted murder that you often find in just about any action-ish movie.
Back into the fire!
But what jumped out at me the most this time, as a human being living in an increasingly digital world, was the way in which Baymax, Hero, and the gang used some questionable tactics by tapping into the medical information of the people of San Francisco.
Functionality improved. 1000% increase in range.
In other words, I wanted to answer the question, did Baymax just violate HIPAA all over San Francisco? The answer to that, coming up on Legal Bytes. So to start off, I'm not here to ruin Disney or Marvel for anyone. I grew up as a typical SoCal kid, which means that Disneyland was a place that other people visited, but really, come on, it actually belonged to me. And that love didn't stop when I got older either. I mean, at UT Law School's graduation, we don't do a cap and gown. We wear white suits and call it a sunflower ceremony. It's a long story, but it's basically rooted in the long-standing tradition of lawyers being contrarian. And now here we are 100 years later with that same tradition. So I, being a total weirdo and something of a contrarian myself, decided that I wanted to wear my own graduation cap, specifically one with Mickey ears. And yes, I wore it during graduation and pretty much only took it off to cross the stage and accept my diploma. Because I mean, come on, I have some sense of respect for decorum. But anyway, yes, I love Disney and I love Marvel, and I won't get into it today, but I also have a whole story about that one time that I met Stan Lee as a kid before he had massive crowds surrounding him all the time. I'll save that story for another time though. Anyway, let's put Baymax and his cohort through a fine-toothed comb. First, I'll go over the storyline to give some context to our analysis, then I'll give our analysis of the issues presented, and then I'll give a verdict. As always, I'll put the timestamps for each of those markers in the description below, so if you're just here for the verdict, you can skip to it. But of course, Big Hero 6 may have come out back in 2014, which is doubly an eternity ago since the pandemic time counts as like 2 decades, but you may have been stuck in a block of adamantium for the last 6-ish years for all I know, and I just don't want to be responsible for spoiling it for you. So if you haven't seen it yet, I will give you 10 seconds of kitten footage to situate yourself properly.
Harry baby. Harry baby.
Starting now. Big Hero 6 is a Disney/Marvel movie adapted in 2014 from a comic book series published by Marvel Comics and created by Man of Action. It's set in the fictional city of San Francisco, which you can guess by its name is a blend of San Francisco and Tokyo. Although not explicitly stated in the movie, research into behind-the-scenes information shows San Francisco is set in 2032 in what used to be the city of San Francisco, California. In Big Hero 6 world, after the earthquake of 1906 destroyed the city, which is a real-life event that leveled like 80% of the city, the people of Big Hero 6 world's San Francisco came together and with the help of Japanese immigrants used a blend of American and Japanese architecture techniques to make the city even stronger than ever before. As a result of the accomplishments as well as the important role played by Japanese immigrants, they decided to rename San Francisco San Francisco. The movie follows the story of Hiro Hamada, a 14-year-old boy whose parents died when he was very young. He's living with his Aunt Cass, who is taking care of both Hiro and his older brother, Tadashi. Tadashi is a student at the San Francisco Institute of Technology, or what Hiro calls the quote-unquote nerd school. After finishing high school at the age of 13, Hiro, lacking adequate challenges in his life, has resolved himself to engage in illegal bot fighting for fun. Tadashi manages to pique Hiro's interest in his school's program when he brings him to the school to meet friends and show him all of the cool things they've been working on. Tadashi's project is a huggable robot named Baymax, who is a personal healthcare companion. He can respond to the patient's pain utterance and immediately start analyzing for and treating the ailment. After being totally wowed by Baymax, Hiro meets Professor Robert Callahan, the head of the robotics program. Starstruck, Hiro decides he really wants to apply to the program. Newly motivated, Hiro decides to apply by signing up for a competition at the university where he presents a new project called Microbots. Hiro finds out after the presentation that he's been accepted into the program, but before the night is over, a massive explosion erupts in the showcase hall, killing Tadashi and presumably destroying all of Hiro's microbots. After weeks of grief over Tadashi's death, Hiro encounters Baymax again, and together they stumble into a discovery that suggests the explosion wasn't an accident, but rather a ploy by a man wearing a kabuki mask, who, as it turns out, is actually Professor Callahan, to steal the microbots for some unknown purpose. As they dig deeper, Tadashi's and Hiro's friends from the quote nerd school get pulled in, and they form the Big Hero 6. Together, they work to identify, find, and apprehend Professor Callahan to solve the mystery and foil his nefarious plan. Also, this happens.
Our first landing together as a team.
Guys, come on.
Quarantine? Do you people know what quarantine means?
Quarantine, enforced isolation to prevent contamination that could lead to disease or, in some cases, death.
Aw, that had such a different effect before the pandemic. A crucial part to Callahan's capture was Baymax's apparent programming to scan medical information of literally everyone he encounters.
His blood type is AB negative. Cholesterol levels
Baymax, you scanned him?
I am programmed to assess everyone's healthcare needs.
Yes! I can use the data from your scan to find him!
After scanning the entire city, Baymax finds a match to the Kabuki Mask Man, and they go on to try to take him down before it's too late. One thing to note is that, of course, this is fictional and in an alternate universe, and sometimes people get a little bit about applying the law to fictional futuristic scenarios. But it is set in California, so we can suspend our disbelief just a little bit and apply some law to show how some of this stuff works. So, there. Okay, so throughout the movie, Baymax repeatedly accesses a lot of people's health information without getting any kind of permission from anyone. He does this multiple times to Hiro, and then casually mentions that, oh yeah, he's actually programmed to scan literally everyone he comes in contact with.
I am programmed to assess everyone's healthcare needs.
And then the whole gang decides that it's a good idea to have Baymax scan the health information of literally everyone in the city of San Francisco in order to get the Kabuki Mask Man.
You'd have to scan everyone in San Francisco, and that might take, I don't know, forever.
No. I just have to look for another angle. Got it! I'll scan the whole city at the same time. I just have to upgrade Baymax's sensor.
Functionality improved. 1000% increase in range. I have found a match. On that island.
So when Baymax scans everyone like that, is he violating HIPAA? First, let's start with what it is. HIPAA, or the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, was enacted by Congress in 1996 to give the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, or HHS, the power to issue privacy regulations concerning the storage of and access to individually identifiable health information. To implement those regulations, HHS issued the Standards for Privacy of Individually Identifiable Health Information, also known as the Privacy Rule. Now bear with me because this part might get a little dry, but it'll be worth it when I put it all together. Basically, the Privacy Rule says that a covered entity can't use or disclose private health information except in two circumstances. First, where HHS regulations as laid out elsewhere require the disclosure, and second, if the disclosure is authorized in writing by the individual that's the subject of the information or by his or her personal representative. Okay, so a few definitions there. A covered entity is an individual or entity that falls into one of basically four categories. 1. Health plans. This means individual or group plans that provide or pay the cost of medical care. So basically, health insurance providers, dental insurance providers, Medicare, etc. 2. healthcare providers. That's basically what it sounds like. Doctors, dentists, etc., medical professionals who are handling your sensitive health information and transmitting them electronically in connection with certain transactions. 3. Healthcare clearinghouses. These are entities that process non-standard information they receive from another entity into standard information or vice versa. These include billing services, reprising companies, community health management information systems, etc. And finally, 4. Business associates. Generally, a business associate is a person or organization other than a member of the covered entity's workforce that performs certain functions or activities on behalf of those other 3 entities, or who provides certain services to those entities. The type of services this means is things like legal, accounting, consulting, data aggregation, administrative, management, etc. So those are the groups that are subject to HIPAA regulations. They can't use or disclose protected health information, or PHI. That's information that identifies the individual or provides a reasonable basis to believe it can be used to identify an individual, and that relates to any of the following 3 things. 1. An individual's past, present, or future physical or mental health or condition. 2. The provision of health care to an individual. Or 3, the past, present, or future payment for the provision of health care to the individual. And the last term I want to go over is the personal representative. That's generally someone who is named as the individual's agent either by the individual, like in a healthcare power of attorney or advanced medical directive, or who is appointed by the court as an agent for the individual, like a guardian or a conservator. So, does Baymax violate HIPAA? Well, not exactly. Looking back at the privacy rule, in order to violate the HIPAA regulations by using medical data without people's consent, Baymax or anyone else in Big Hero 6 would need to fall into one of the categories I mentioned before. Going through each one, you can see they don't really fit into any one of them. First, he's obviously not a health plan because that would just be an odd comparison to like Medicaid or something. Second, he's not a healthcare provider, although he kind of acts like one. He's technically a healthcare companion, and while he administers treatments after diagnosing various physical and mental ailments, to say he's a physician is still just a little bit of a stretch. Next, he's also not a healthcare clearinghouse. Although he definitely processes information, he's not processing information received from another covered entity, he's processing information that he himself receives. And finally, he's not a business associate because, as far as we can tell in the movie, Baymax is a prototype, and Tadashi never entered into any sort of agreements with healthcare providers for Baymax's services, and no doctor has assigned Baymax to, for example, Hero for treatment or anything like that. So what is Baymax really? Well, he's kind of like a giant multi-purpose biometric scanner and kind of a machine learning robot. He can really most closely be compared to a modern day app or a wearable device. And fun fact, even though HIPAA has been updated over the years since 1996, those apps and devices we love to use to lose weight, get fit, train for events, or in case of fertility apps, have babies, are not subject to HIPAA. That's because they're intended for personal use. So all of that super personal information that you, to some extent, willingly give can be used by the company pretty much any way that they want, which of course is something to think about before you download something and start giving it your health information. Now, some apps or gadgets can end up falling under HIPAA's regulations if the company that runs the app or makes the device enters into a contract with a covered entity for services involving your private health information. So it's definitely possible for Baymax to become subject to HIPAA at a later time if they ever mass produce Baymax and partner him up with healthcare providers. Although Tadashi doesn't say it explicitly, that sounds like a potential goal he has for Baymax. But for now, he's not. Okay, so there's actually a lot more that I can talk about regarding some other laws in the United States on this subject, but given the length of the video, I'll leave it here for today. If you want to hear a part 2 to this analysis where I talk about a couple other possibilities, let us know in the comments and I'll happily do a follow-up. Otherwise, basically, because Baymax and the rest of Big Hero 6 don't fall into any of the categories of a covered entity as defined by the HIPAA statute, even though they really, you could say, TikTok their way into people's personal information, as far as I can tell, there's no violation of HIPAA in this movie. So what do you guys think? Is there something you think maybe we may have missed? Do you want to hear more on this subject in a part 2 video? Do you have any questions? Do you have any recommendations for future pop culture trials? Let us know in the comments. We have a running list of topics that we would love to do, but we always love hearing ideas from you guys too. Otherwise, if you found this video informative or enjoyable, please hit that like button because it does help us with the YouTube algorithm gods. And I would love it if you guys would also share this with your friends, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell. You know the drill. Otherwise, I don't know, maybe the Kabuki Man will come after you. It's not a threat. I don't know where he is these days. It's just what I hear. Okay, till next time. Thanks.